Today we're going to look at Indicator 1.4. This indicator will be broken into two parts. Part 1 will cover the Articles of Confederation and its strengths and weaknesses. In Part 2, we will discuss how the Constitution was written to solve the weaknesses of the Articles. Indicator 1.4 says, analyze how dissatisfactions with the government under the Articles of Confederation were addressed with the writings of the Constitution of 1787, including the debates and compromises reached at the Philadelphia Convention and the ratification of the Constitution. By the end of this indicator, you should be able to summarize the strengths and weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, as well as describe how the Constitution solved those weaknesses. You should be able to state the differences between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Today we're going to analyze the dissatisfactions of the Articles of Confederation. By the end of this video, you should be able to summarize the structure and weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation government, as well as evaluate whether or not the Articles of Confederation was effective. When we last talked, Americans were fighting to preserve the rights of the colonial assemblies and representation. The Continental Congress provided a model for the Articles of Confederation government. The Congress was made up of representatives from each of the 13 states, working together for the cause of independence. The Second Continental Congress met and declared independence, then worked to plan the government that would suit the needs of all the states. The Articles of Confederation is the first government of the United States. It was created during the Revolutionary War and contained no executive branch, only a unicameral Congress, due to the fear that a strong executive branch might evolve into a monarch like the king. It functioned as a loose confederation with most power given directly to individual states, and was designed to protect the rights the colonists were fighting for. The structure of the Articles of Confederation was based largely on the framers' experiences with the injustices put down by the king and Parliament. The framers feared a strong executive might try to usurp power. This led to the majority of the power being held at the state level, with a weak unicameral Congress at the national level. This unicameral Congress had little power. National laws required 9 votes, and amendments to the Articles of Confederation required all 13 states to agree, making amendments nearly impossible to pass. The Articles also did not have a judicial branch to settle disputes between the states. States were sovereign and created their own constitutions to suit their individual needs. Pause this video and consider these questions. What is the first government of the United States called? What was the structure of the Articles based on? Can you describe the structure of the Articles of Confederation? Where was power centralized? When you can answer them confidently, move on to the next part of the video. The Confederation government worked well while the states were fighting for their independence. They had a common cause to focus on, one that mattered more than individual squabbles. However, once the war was over, it became clear that the Articles of Confederation were too weak to meet the needs of a large, growing nation with many differing views. The Confederation government's effectiveness was almost immediately called into question when disputes broke out over new land obtained from the British after the war. Each state wanted to claim parts of this territory, causing many disputes, and the government lacked a way to settle them. The controversy was resolved when the states agreed to cede the land to the control of the Confederation government. This land created a national domain, and the Confederation government established a method for distributing the land. Through the creation of land ordinances, the government set the precedent for the creation of new states, starting with a territory known as the Northwest Ordinance. This is one of the major successes of the Articles of Confederation government. The Northwest Ordinance is important for 2 reasons. First, it set the precedent for how new states would enter the Union. New states created from the land ordinances could apply for statehood once the population of the territory reached a specific number. These new states would function on equal terms within the Union as the original 13 states. The second thing the Northwest Ordinance did is outlaw slavery in the territory. This is the first effort by the national government to regulate slavery and the slave trade, which is going to set up the conflict that will eventually lead to the Civil War. Pause this video and consider these questions. What were 2 successes of the Articles? What is the major problem with the Articles of Confederation government? What 2 key things did the Northwest Ordinance do? When you know the answers to these questions, move on. Although the Confederation government proved effective during the war, it was quickly evident that it wouldn't work for the growing, changing nation. Having little power at the central level, the government couldn't meet the needs of the nation. It lacked the power to solve national problems like interstate trade and disputes, as well as negotiate treaties with foreign nations. The states refused to acknowledge the authority of the central government, making it even weaker. The Confederation government struggled to force the British to live up to the provisions of the Treaty of Paris, signed after the war ended, as well as failed to persuade the British to allow for the continuation of trade. States were attempting to negotiate with the British and the Spanish individually, causing increased turmoil between the states, and possibly, most importantly, the central government lacked the authority to impose taxes on the states, which left the government devoid of funds. The government was unable to support an army due to lack of funds, causing a lack of diplomatic clout. Due to the interruptions of trade with the British, the colonists were facing economic depression alongside the challenges of a weak Confederation government. Many Americans found it difficult to pay their mortgages and loans. This led to the rebellion known as Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts. Daniel Shays was a farmer and former soldier, but he was in danger of losing his farm. He and others led a series of violent attacks on courthouses and other government properties from 1786 to 1787. The national government didn't have the power to raise an army to quell the rebellion, and so the attacks continued. The unrest continued until a Massachusetts militia stepped in. This event frightened many of the elite and prompted support for a stronger central government. The event demonstrated a lack of the Confederation government's power to maintain domestic tranquility. Pause for a moment and consider these questions. What is the problem with the government structure under the Articles of Confederation? Can you summarize at least two major weaknesses of the Confederation government? Can you describe the impact of Shays' Rebellion and why it's important? When you're confident you can answer these questions, move on. The weaknesses and failures of the Confederation government drastically outweigh the successes. The Articles of Confederation failed to meet the needs of a growing nation after the war and led to feelings of support for a strong central government. Washington came out of his retirement to meet with delegates in Philadelphia to discuss the creation of a new government. Those in attendance at the Constitutional Convention were sworn to secrecy and began the process of creating a new government designed to address the flaws of the Articles of Confederation. Today's objective is to analyze the dissatisfactions with the Articles of Confederation government. You should be able to summarize the structure of the Articles of Confederation as well as its successes and failures. Think about what you have learned and determine if you think the Confederation was an effective government. You should be able to cite reasons why it was or was not. In the next video, we will discuss how the Constitution was written to solve the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. See you next time!